helping you with Acorn and RISC OS computing.
Hello.
Hello.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, yes.
I see thumbs up. This is good. Okay. Right, so I'm going to be sharing some slides. Which would be good if I could find which one my slides were. That one. Okay. Right. So, all being well, you should be able to see Doom Games, my slides. All right. Okay. Good evening. This will hopefully be an interesting presentation about the games that I ported back in the late 90s and I've been recently updating. I'm going to talk about the games Doom, Heretic and Hexen. I'll try to make it interesting without too much technical detail. Please feel free to use the chat to ask questions as we go, and I will try to pay attention to it and answer questions that come up. At the end of the presentation, these slides and a bunch of links to resources will also be made available. First though, let me introduce myself. I'm Charles, previously known as Justin, better known as Gerph. I've done work on RISC OS since the early 90s, patching and porting things, developing RISC OS itself, and most recently creating a new implementation of the OS, RISC OS Pyromaniac. In many respects, my later work with RISC OS Limited is directly tied to having done work on the Doom games, and it all goes way back to university, around 1997. So first, what is Doom? Well, Doom's a game, a first-person shooter, written by ID Software. It was first released in 1993 for DOS, and it changed the way that games were viewed on the PC. ID Software's prior game, Wolfenstein 3D, had been ported to RISC OS by Eddie Edwards. It was a success in the RISC OS world, and Eddie obtained code for Doom. But the license costs were very high, and it didn't get released. This was back in '97 whilst I was at university. My friend Chris and I got a leaked copy of Doom. This was a version from Eddie Edwards' port, and it wasn't ready for release. It was really in the middle of development. It worked on the RISC PC and on the A5000, but it only had sound on the RISC PC. It wasn't too bad speed-wise either. I only had an A5000, but Chris had a RISC PC, which was much better. The difference between them was quite marked, and the sound was a big difference. I wasn't one to take such things as they were and began investigating. I worked through the game binary in Zap and began to understand how the sound was meant to work and what the code did to trigger the effects. With a few small patches and quite a bit of data extracted from Doom's data files, I created a version that played sound on the A5000. However, because I wasn't very familiar with the sound system, I used standard RISC OS sound modules. One module for every sample that could be played. The RISC OS sound system only supports having 32 voices loaded at a time. In any case, the memory on a 4 megabyte A5000 is rather pushed, so you couldn't load too many. My patches would load the modules on demand and kill off any that weren't needed as the system became full. A bit of a round-robin sort of attempt to get as much in memory as possible. I might not have been able to do the 16-bit color video that Chris's RISC PC could, but my A5000 now had sound. So when I looked through the code, the networking was quite intriguing. It appeared to be able to do networking if you just passed the right data in and out. What right was, however, was much more difficult. ID Software had made available code for the network drivers, but for DOS, obviously. Using this information, I managed to patch in some networking using Ethernet. 2 copies of Doom, one on each of our A5000s. I could connect via the Ethernet network and play multiplayer games against myself and my brother. We had a lot of fun with that. The networking was later expanded to support playing over serial port and over IP using UDP. Using IP networking on an A5000 whilst trying to play Doom and having the sound loaded was something of a strain. was just about doable as long as you didn't have a very complicated level. You also have to remember that this is in the days of dial-up networking, so that was even more of a challenge. Fortunately, around this time, I bought a RISC PC, which began to make things a lot easier to work with. Having got the networking working, I continued to tinker with the code and added support to allow the game, which had been exclusively full screen, to run in the desktop. Not very practical on an A5000, but quite playable on a RISC PC. You could even play the game on the icon bar. This is the game here. You can see the icon bar version here. This is the window version, and these are a couple of the tools that I wrote to manage this. The computer icon on the icon bar down here, this one, would control the network settings. Every time you clicked it, it would switch between standalone to client to server. I passed a couple of copies of this game to a few people, and the attention that the game had been gathering, not only for my own work, but other people as well, meant that RComp got interested in properly releasing the game. Eddie and RComp released Doom to the RISC OS world not long after that. Having got a proper release, I was asked to write some network drivers for the game, as my patches weren't really usable as they were. Eddie had done a really nice job of making the network drivers modular, so I could reuse some of the code that I'd created previously. I remember at the time Andrew repeatedly asking me if I'd looked at the network drivers, but I was trying to focus on my final year exams. In a rare case of willpower, I actually managed to put off working on them until the exams had finished. I returned home after university, and I'd not worked out what I wanted to do as a job. So speaking to Andrew, he let me have the source to the front end to address some bugs and add a few features, as Eddie had moved on now to other things. I added some of the features that I'd used in my Doom WADS application, like the pit patch manager and the text viewer, and it was quite successful. So I took on enhancing Doom itself. This is what would become Doom Plus. So this was quite a while this took. But what was Doom Plus? So the remit for Doom Plus was really just to make things cooler. Fixing some bugs, removing limitations, make the game a bit faster, add some new features. They were all on the cards. And there's a lot I've already written about Doom Plus in my rambles. But there's a couple of little things that are interesting about it. At the time, CD-ROMs were far more common than MIDI interfaces. MIDI being the sound that was supported on the original DOS version. I often listened to other music whilst testing the game, so I added in CD controls to the game as well. Not only could you control the CD in the game, but if you were running in the desktop, it would communicate with the CD2B application, find out what the tracks were called from the internet, and provide notice of the new tracks when they changed. There's a comment in my notes. Doom, one of the few Acorn games with a built-in CD jukebox. With CD music, I also tried to make the game a little more immersive by making atmospheric music. This was done by bumping the volume as you came to the action. It only kind of worked, but it was an interesting experiment. After adding some of the smoothed walls and textures, I began to notice something really odd about parts of the display. Blue pixels would shimmer sometimes within the smooth textures. I could not work out what was going on. It was very strange. I spent some time reworking the code, adding in diagnostics, saving out screenshots, and nothing useful showed up. I don't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on. And after a few weeks looking at this on and off, I tried the same game on a different machine, and the problem went away. I'm assuming it was some odd timing effect on my machine, but I wasted a whole bunch of time just staring at what was essentially shimmering dots on a screen. I really wish I'd had some tests to exercise the code somewhat, because then I could have shown this is working and been really confident about it. But instead I wasted the time. That's the way things go. There were a lot of other things in Doom as well. The in-game clock, network presentation, better map information, transparent fireballs, even silly bouncing text for the menus. The development was quite long, and there's a comment in my notes from what was going on at Acorn. It says, lethargy is setting in at the moment. It's so hard to concentrate when you're always wondering what the point is. I know I'm continuing with this, but since Acorn isn't Acorn anymore, well, you get the idea. This was not long after the September 17th announcement of the closure of the Workstations division. Despite the Acorn announcement and the extra work leading up to RISC OS Limited's formation, a couple of releases were made. Doom Plus even came second in the Acorn News Service Awards for 1999. Acorn Arcade's review gave Doom Plus a rating of 83%. And so we come to Heretic. This was slightly less development time, thankfully. It wasn't really a game I knew. It's essentially a Doom engine, but with fantasy elements instead of science fiction and hell-based themes. Whilst I'd been working on Doom Plus, Andrew had been in negotiations with Raven Software, who created the Heretic and Hexen games. When the game was finally licensed from them, we got the source code and I could start looking at how to port it. After a false start, I managed to get a rudimentary game up and running in about a few hours. It didn't have any input, but it ran. There followed a few months more of development to get the input, the rendering, the sound working properly, and mostly it went quite well, even with the distractions of getting Doom Plus finished at the same time. By the end of December, Heretic had most of the rendering integrated from Doom, and with the Heretic enhancements and a cut down and modified version of the Doom Plus launcher you can see here. This screenshot's actually from the old version of Heretic, but running on RISC OS Select. It looks a lot better on Select because the shaded icons end up being blended to the window backgrounds. My notes from Heretic lament how the game is too dark some of the time. This became a constant problem in Heretic and later Hexen. I tried a number of different ways of addressing this, which resulted in this bright 24-bit option. And that would try and bump the lighting up to about twice its expected level. However, because it wasn't right, it just didn't address the issue. The actual lighting issue wasn't fixed until this year. There were other interesting features in Heretic that Doom had missed out on. Heretic has anti-aliased smoothing of the map lines, which means that all the lines are a lot not nicer in the maps. It even fades out at the edges of the maps, which you can just about see here and here. Seeing this effect, I thought that was very cool, and I pinched the code and integrated it into Doom. The overlay map then became feasible because it could fade out at the edges and make the overlay less jarring to the user. Heretic also had fun game features that Doom didn't and couldn't have, particularly for things like the water. There were water currents that pushed you around, and when you were in the water, it would obscure the character's feet, making it seem like it had actual depth. As Heretic was being developed, whilst I was finishing Doom Plus, many of the networking features from Doom Plus got passed back into Heretic as well. So Heretic's networking was a lot better than Doom's was originally. Heretic was released in February, with some updates and fixes in March and May. However, Heretic was ported alongside Hexen. So, for background, Hexen is a continuation of those fantasy elements that were started in Heretic, but expanded them even more. Instead of having a simple linear level, there were puzzles in different areas that could be completed in different orders, all through hub areas. And as the player, you could choose one of 3 different character classes to play: a fighter, a cleric, and a mage, each with different strengths and weapons, which made the game different. The Hexen source code arrived at the same time as Heretic, and much of the development was done in parallel. Although Heretic was the main area I was working in, as it was a simpler game, what I learnt from one could go into Hexen as well. At the start of the development, I got things working in just 6 hours. So having got Heretic working in such a short time, I spent a whole day working on Hexen, because it was more complicated. And I got it to a similar point. It ran the demo, and it was working. It just wasn't very fast. And then I returned to Heretic, and didn't come back for another month. At which point I realised quite how slow it was. My notes say that on the Strongarm machine, I was getting about 20 frames per second at 320 by 200. And it was taking a whole 20 seconds just to start up. The startup problem was at least easily fixed, because I could integrate some of the cached loading from Doom and add some memory debugging from Heretic. There's a comment in my notes.
Still shocked to see.
WTF is a poly object. Heretic had lots of things that were in Doom, but Hexen was much more complex in many different ways, and this was one of the introductions to the map objects that were different. A poly object is a part of the map which is able to have effects applied to it. They could slide or rotate in ways that weren't supported by typical Doom engine. This made for doors that could swing open or rotating barriers. Here we can see a door that we can open. Unlike in Doom, the door will swing when pushed. You can see here it's swinging open. And there we are, the door is open. However, this feature was made even more powerful by another Hexen-specific feature, scripting. Different events like hitting things, pressing buttons, or even randomly delayed events could trigger a script defined in the level. For example, this meant that walls could be pulled away in a sequence, or regions could rotate. Monsters could be spawned and doors opened in a scripted way. When you hit the windows in Hexen, the glass will shatter and fragments fall to the ground. Trees can have leaves blow off them and drift across the landscape. This made the maps in Hexen much more complex and a lot more interesting. But it made the game a lot slower as well. Some parts of this code could be optimized, but it didn't have the big gains that the main rendering system got by porting from Heretic. The final timing that I've got in my notes for Hexen is that on a Strongarm, in 8-bit, I was getting 15.4 frames per second for 640 by 480. That's not bad, but it's a little low. For the complexity and the size of the display, it's not too bad. Heretic and Hexen were released together in a pack. An Acorn Gaming review back in '99, they were given a 5 out of 5 rating. Acorn Arcade review gave the pack an 80% rating. Also in '99, there was a one-off present that I created. On Christmas Day 1999, I sent round a special release of Doom Plus to friends and testers. This was the Prezi release. It had a number of updates that hadn't been seen in public yet. There were some new launcher options, a jump option, looking up and down, some extra wipe effects, and there was some snow. I don't believe those features ever saw a wider release at the time. But before we move on to modern game development, does anybody have any questions about the old games? Anyone? No? Okay. I will move on to the modern day. So now we're jumping forward to the start of 2024. Why go back to Hexen? Well, at the start of January, my fiancée suggested that I try doing something else that I enjoy. I'd been feeling pretty down for a while and she knew what would help. So I dusted off the Hexen sources. They were the only ones that I had under Git source control. And I started updating them for a more modern build system and to run as 32-bit. So there are a number of parts that go into making the games work. As you can see, this is the structure of the main top level of the game. And this is what actually builds all of the things that I released RComp. It's made up of a few bits. There's the game binary here in hex and game. There's support module here. That provides the sound and the input for the game. There's the desktop launcher, which is actually the Hexen front end here. And there's an extra launcher tool as well. And then there's some other tools we want to release, the ACC tool here. And there are some other files here that we use for testing. They run the game and they test whether it actually does what we expect it to do.
Not really bad.
So each of the parts here, this is the front end directory. This has got sources in it. They've got C and H files and a make file just like normal. And those can be built and run independently of the rest of the game. So I can test those out without having to worry about anything else. And this is the game itself. The game's a little bit more, the game binary is a little bit more complicated because it builds 5 different variants of the game. For the 8-bit, for 24-bit, high resolutions, and the A5000 version. Yeah, there isn't actually an A5000 version. There's a question in the chat. How long does a clean build take? I think the clean build of all these 5 versions is about 1 minute 30 seconds on my machine. Something like that anyway. I think I've got some timings down at in one of the later slides, so we'll actually be able to see that. And if we get to the end, I'll demonstrate an actual build if you're interested. Actually though, I don't just build 5 versions, we actually build 10 versions because we build this both for debug and for release as well. So it takes a little bit longer than that. In general though, I just type make and a short single build takes 10 seconds or so. So, converting the game. The first thing to do was to convert the game itself, the actual binary code. 32-bit conversions are not very complicated if the code is written in C. You just add the APCS 332 and you link it with stubs G, or a 32-bit stubs library. If there are a few assembler files, it's a little bit more complicated, and understandably, there are some assembler in here to build things that are faster than the compiler would produce. Fortunately, the differences are really minor. It's literally a matter of taking away the upticks here so that they're not there and replacing the S without an S. That's it. It's no more complicated than that. At the time, I took the opportunity to make the code clearer by adding some macros and making some of the code a little bit tidier with some extra comments and things. Pretty much it was the same process that I'd done when I made the 32-bit version of RISC OS for RISC OS Limited many years ago. The assembler code took a couple of hours to convert safely and to get it all to link together, and then I could try it out, which of course didn't work. I was testing all of this under RISC OS Pyromaniac, and there's a few differences in how it works and how RISC OS Classic works, some of which you don't find out until you run things. Most particularly, in this case, the game was highly reliant on having the support module, and if it didn't have it, it would actually crash. I hadn't converted the module yet, so I just changed all the codes that if the support module wasn't there, it ignored it. That way I could get the game starting, but it wouldn't have any input or any sound. It was largely successful, and the game got as far as trying to start up and put the startup screen up, at which point it crashed again because it can't write to screen memory, because RISC OS Pyromaniac doesn't have screen memory. Pyromaniac only allows you to access the display through OS interfaces. That means VGU calls, OSPlot, color trans calls, and sprite operations. So I had to update the entire video system so that it can use sprites to render to the screen. What it'll do is it'll try to use a mode and see if it can access the screen. If it can, it will. If it can't, it'll switch to using sprite rendering. So sprite rendering is going to be slower, but it allows more flexibility about the types of modes we can use. We can use a large screen mode with the game running at low resolution and have it scale up, or vice versa. We can have it run really high resolution and scale down to the screen. Why does that matter? Well, some of the hardware, mostly the modern one, don't support low resolution modes. If the user wanted to use 320 by 200, which is the original resolution, they wouldn't have been able to. And they might not even have an 8-bit mode. They might have hardware that only has 24-bit. But by using sprites and rendering this way, it would still work, slower, but more flexible. So this image shows an early startup with lots of debugging enabled. A day or so later, though, I had a game that ran. Not well again, because there was debug area and it wasn't fast. From running the game to getting the menu to start took about 70 seconds. And that's absolutely the fault of all the instrumentation being present in Pyromaniac. All that instrumentation tells me exactly what went wrong and how it got there. The demo also starts up as well, and we get a shocking 2.5 seconds per frame. Yeah, seconds per frame, not frames per second. But that's okay, because it was actually working. Spin forward a week or so, and I've converted the front end, the support module, we have sound and input, and the game starts up pretty well. Even RISC OS Pyromaniac gets 3.5 frames a second now, and it's running really well on RPCMU. The original Hexen that I released in 2000 only supported resolutions up to 1280 by 1280, but I knew that modern systems would support much higher, so I decided I'll just double the limits. So make it support 2560 by 2560, which fortunately includes the very common 1920 by 1080 resolution. Internally, most of the rendering works fine anyway, because you just update the some constants, but some parts of the code needed special attention. The most recent release actually will support 8192 by 8192, so hopefully that's enough for a while. Having got it working with RISC OS Pyromaniac and on RPCMU, I needed to try some more things out, so I sent a copy to Chris to have a try out. He had a Pinebook Pro, he could give it a whirl, and it failed. Why? Because for all my expectations, I still hadn't assumed that there would be only one screen mode available. The Pinebook only supports 1920 by 1080. I just hadn't considered that you'd only have one available. And the startup screen still tried to start in a lower resolution, and if it didn't get it, it blew up. So I replaced the startup screen with the same sprite operations that we did with the main game, and it ran. Chris had a happily running Pinebook Pro game. So I dropped a copy to Andrew, who was quite surprised at the out-of-the-blue message. We did a few iterations, and Andrew sent me a ROCC board to try it out on with all the bits I needed. So many thanks to him for that little board. Here we can see Hexen running on the ROCC at 1920 by 1080. This is on my telly. Meanwhile, I'm also looking at the lighting problems. The lighting on Doom, you can see it's a little bit bright here. It's not really bright. It may be bright, but it is getting solid 35 frames a second. As you remember, the Brighten option that I'd added before hadn't been very effective, and unfortunately, it seemed that with larger resolutions, it got worse. I spent a lot of time searching around, and I found 2 bugs in how the codes were determined. How the lighting was determined and where the bugs were, and they'd been there since the original conversion. Took a while, but with that, the colours matched up. Here you can see RISC OS. On the left here, we've got the RISC OS version, and this is Hexen running in Chocolate Doom. The browns here and the browns here are the same, and that took so much work to get right. Andrew also asked if I could add MP3 music to the game, as CD music now wasn't really a thing. and nobody had MIDI hardware. I ummed and ahed, and I said, oh, it's going to be really hard, I don't know how to do that. And then a few hours later, I had something working. It probably took me longer to add the launcher options to select the MP3 choice than it did to actually add the MP3 music to the game. During the development, I was making changes and checking that they were working manually. But I also had automated builds happening on my server. Every time I pushed the changes, they were built there to make sure that I hadn't forgotten to commit anything, building both the release and the debug version. As the game started working well, I added the ability to actually run the game code as well. After the game is built on Linux, it will be sent over to the build service with a set of templated parameters to run the game. It starts the game automatically and runs for 10 seconds. You can see here, this is the sort of command we were running. This is the timer for 10 seconds. If it ran successfully, it would come to the end and go, exit OK. If the game were to crash or access some bad memory during that time, it wouldn't get to the exit OK and would exit with an error code, and I'd know that I shouldn't release it. Then, after Andrew complained yet again that I'd left some debug in, I added some extra checks to make sure that the release didn't include any debug. These checks mean that, at the barest minimum, the game runs. It might not run right, but it at least runs. It's useful to do this because it wastes everyone's time if I send out a version that doesn't even start. Hexen was released at the 2024 Southwest Show, and an update went out in early April. So, we're going to brave the demo now. Let's have a see what we can do. Now, one of the things about this is that we've got a bunch of videos running, and that might mean that this game runs a little bit slowly. So, let's have a see how we can do, shall we? Okay. All right. We should have a screen. Can I have a thumbs up that we can actually see this RISC simulator? Cool.
Yes, yes.
Excellent. All right. Let's give this a whirl then. Hexen. New Hexen. Okay. See if this works. New Hexen. Go. Right. All being well, can we also hear music?
Yes.
Whoa. Brilliant. Right, so I'm going to start this at 800 by 600 in 16 million colours. And we'll see how we do. All right. Go on, start the game. Ooh, I'm not sure this is very fast. Let's see how fast we're getting, shall we? Yeah, that's plummeting. Ooh, dear. About 7 frames a second. Yeah, this is not great. This might just be enough to demo. Yeah, let's have a see how we do, shall we? Oh, this is painful. Shall I try it with 640 by 480? Yeah, let's try that. Ooh, that was pretty. All right, let's give it a go with 640, 480. No guarantees this will be any better, but we can at least try it. I don't want to give you the wrong impression, but it is a lot better when it's actually running without anything else. Okay, so we're getting about maybe 8 or 9. All right, well, we'll give it a whirl anyway. I'll show you some bits. Let's turn it off. So we've got some monsters here we can kill. It's not actually going that backward. I'm hoping it will actually be sharing sensibly. So a couple of monsters to kill there. If we come around here, there should be another one that's going to get in my way otherwise. There you go. Right, so some little features that Doom doesn't have. So this is a tree, looking like a tree. We can hit it, and when we hit it, it falls apart. If we go over here, we should be able to see this tree. Or maybe it's not this tree, maybe it's this tree here. This tree here has some leaves that are blowing around, which is all very pretty. And if I head back over here, you should be able to see the door that I was showing earlier. Oh, I'll just show you the broken glass. There we go. Some shattered glass. There we are. And doors that open, which is quite nice. There's also the usual effects when you walk over a particular region. It opens the door and monsters come out. So, there we go. That is Hexen. Okay. Does anybody have any quick questions about the Hexen development process before I move on? Anyone? Nope. Nitrex says the graphics of the game hold up really well. They're not actually that bad. I mean, it's not wonderful, but it's not too terrible. If I can... Ooh, let me just try this. See if this comes out okay. Right, I may die here, but see if I can just kill these off. If I can turn on the smoothing, it might show the... a second. Right, is that all the monsters? No, it's not all the monsters on this one. Right, smoothing. Resam. Resam. This is going to go a lot slower, but if you can see here, hopefully, the walls are a lot nicer. And looking up and down, look down at the floor a little bit. You can see the floors are a little bit smoother as well. Ceiling smoothed off. It runs a bit slower like that. So, Mark asks, what's my favourite feature? I don't know. I think my favourite feature is actually the hub design. So basically, where in Doom you had one level, you finished the level, you moved on to the next one. In Hexen, you move into one level, and then you go through portals, and it takes you another level, and then you can, like monsters, do the things there, open doors, find keys, and then you return back through a portal, and you come back to the original level, which is exactly as you left it, with all the monsters in the same place, all the objects the same way. And that really is one of the better features about it. It really brings the game to be a lot more interesting. It also means that if you're having difficulty doing one area, you can move on to something else and treat it more as a puzzle type game. Okay, there's another question. Can I elaborate more on the lighting? I think we went through a few versions of that. Yeah, so there were a couple of versions back in the old days of trying to get the lighting working before I settled on the bright mode, because I could not work out what the maths was back then. I still couldn't work out the maths this time round, but I got a better handle on what was going on. So what the lighting is, so if we just have a look at the screen here. So I'm not sure if you can you see my pointer? I didn't see my pointer, but anyway, the lighting basically fades out into darkness as you go towards the center of the screen, and that happens both on the top and the bottom. So the bright mode means that the range that uses is doubled. That made it brighter, which was good, but didn't have a lot of effect. We went through a number of things of, okay, is the X resolution causing the lighting to get worse or better? Is the Y resolution making it get worse? Turns out it's the X resolution that was making it get worse, which was helpful because that pointed to something about 320, which was the original resolution being a problem. I checked back in the code and found that there was a 320 listed in the one of the lighting calculations that says what the stepping was going to be. I changed that and said, I can't work anything else out. How is this? And Andrew looked at it and went, it's better, but it's still way too, this time it was too dark this time. And so we went through some things some more, and then I found there was another one later on in the code. And fixing that made it work. So then we went through repeating the whole sequence of, if I do it in a widescreen mode, 16:9, does it look okay? If I do it in 4:3, does it look okay? If I do it in 9:16, does it look okay? If I do it in really tall, does it look okay? Couldn't make all of them work, but yeah, that was the bits there. That was where we got to with that, and I believe it's actually right now, or at least as close as we're going to get it. Comparing it to Chocolate Doom, which is one that tries to get it as close to the originals as possible, that's not bad. It looks like it's doing the right thing. Of course, it's very difficult because you've got to gauge this against a CRT monitor that has 4 to 3 pixels and all the rest of that. So long as it looks good, that's okay. So Chris has asked a question. Sorry, not asked a question. He said, could he pop questions on the Stardot Discord? Yes, that sounds like a really good idea, actually. I watched the Stardot Discord, so yeah, feel free to drop questions that way. Okay. Any other questions? No? Alrighty. Let's quit this. Right. Stop that. Oh, no. Hang on. Switch my sharing back to the presentation. Right, here we go. So let's talk a little bit about Heretic. Here we are. So now we're in February 2024. Hang on, have I missed a question? Let me just scroll back. No, I don't think I have. I think I've got everything. There was only one other comment was that 35 frames per second is the maximum. That was that Andrew made. Yeah, that's the limit on these games, and making that difference is a lot harder. Right. So, Heretic. Heretic was a little easier to get working with. Everything that I'd learnt from Hexen could largely be applied to Heretic. It only took about 4 hours to get something that worked and had all the new mode selection and code to handle the modern machines. I spent a lot of time trying to get this startup screen to work sensibly. It had assumed that an 80 by 25 text screen mode in 16 colours would be available, like mode 14. Of course, that's not actually true of modern hardware. Very few systems have 16 colours, and few have such a low resolution. It's now working fine in whatever mode you give it, but it starts up so fast that you never even see the startup screen. I feel good about the work that I did, but it's a little sad that it doesn't even get seen these days. Backporting the sound and the lighting fixes and the MP3 music from Hexen was really easy, and at the same time the code for the launchers was made much more similar to one another. That meant that making improvements to one game could be passed back to the others. Like Hexen, the game is tested automatically on every push to source control. This is the source control management view. It's not very exciting to see this, but you can see that it does work. If we have a look up here, building all the source code all into all the different variants takes 1 minute 42 seconds on my server. And then we can we run a test job after that takes another 5 minutes just to actually run that code in different ways. So a total of about 7 minutes. You rarely ever even look at the output that generates. But when you do, it looks something like this. Hopefully that's readable. It's a little bit tiny. But essentially up here, we've got a bit of startup here that goes and obtains the tools and the build archives. We then send it to the build service. This is the startup text here being printed. And then finally, we exit successfully if nothing went wrong. Obviously, we don't test the gameplay, but we at least know that the game started. Andrew asked me towards the end of April whether I was happy with the release going out, and I had to do a very quick last-minute fix. After I pushed the change, I got an email telling me that it had failed. It turned out I had left yet another bit of debug turned on, and that caused the failure. There are many reasons to have tests, but knowing that you've not made stupid mistakes, again, is one of the best reasons. Heretic was finally released at the Wakefield show at the end of April. And so it's now time to try out Heretic as a demo. Let's give that a whirl. Okay. New share. And here we go. We should have an RPCMU again. Right. Here we go with Heretic. New Heretic. Right. Knowing that this wasn't very good last time, let's switch us down to 64480 and start out there. Let's try not to be too optimistic. You may have very, very briefly seen the startup screen. It was a bit quick. Okay, let's see how we go with speed on this, shall we? Ticker. Nope, can't tell. There we go. Plummeting and 16 frames a second. That's not bad. Right, so let's have a quick demo of this. So rather than the sort of monsters we had in Doom, we've got some wyverns here. Well, I think they're wyverns, I'm not really sure. Dragony type things. They're flying around and shooting me. Oh, yeah, charging at me, sorry. I'm fighting with a wand which fires with bolts. I can have only 21 bolts left, so I probably need to be a bit more careful, otherwise I'm going to run out. So as you can see here, the lighting is a lot more atmospheric than Hexen was there. And that's partly because this was the first time that it had been introduced. Oh dear, oh dear. Pay attention, pay attention. Run away, run away. Oh. Well, I want to stay alive so I can demonstrate. Right, okay. Let's get some health from over here. All right. So one thing that you get in here is you've got water. And this water, if I can do it right, if I run backwards, you should be able to see the splush as I run around, which is really cute. Assuming I can do this right, there'll be some more over here. Right, you're over the water. Oh, bother. I've run out of weapons again. And hit him with his staff. Hit him with your staff. Get closer. Ow. Right, there we go. And it's got the usual sort of puzzles, so you can get keys. And now I can go through the other door. Over here. Oh yes, I can show the map off. So here's the map. As you can see, the edges fade out as well. Zoom in on it. See the little dagger that I've got a sword there. There's also these little golems, which have a nice effect of their spirits flying away, inhabiting them, which is kind of cute. There we go. Oh, all right. I missed one. And I died. All right. There we go. That's Heretic. Right, so let us try to wrap this up, shall we? New share. Back to the slides. Right. Come on. Right, let's wrap this up. It has been fun going back to doing all these old games, and using RISC OS Pyromaniac to test things the way it was meant to be was good. I've had a chance to play with some modern hardware as well, which was quite interesting and very fast. Mostly it's been pretty relaxing. With the exception of the maths and the confusing code I had to understand again. Am I going to do some more? Well, maybe. I've got a working version of Doom Plus as well, but it's beginning to feel a lot like work, so it might take a while to get things out properly. My fiance asked me, how does it feel to be nearly 50 and be revisiting the games you did over 20 years ago? Yeah, that makes me feel old. Some things were a lot harder, like the maths. It's just faded so much through disuse. And I don't have quite the same energy that I had back then. But it's also kind of nice to see how quickly I returned to the other things. Some of the changes are a lot easier now than they ever would have been back in the day. Partly that's experience, which does pay off. At the end of the day, it was all very familiar, but I was able to see some of it with new eyes. And it was still quite fun. So I hope that's all been quite interesting. I have put some resources up on my presentation site about the development as well. So I shall take any more questions. And I see that Andrew has already reminded me that I forgot something. Let's jump back to Heretic, sorry. Let's go quickly jump. Oh, yeah, okay. Come on. Yes, so there's in Heretic, I was there playing the original game, but there's a free version. So people have recreated all of the assets, not all recreated the assets, created assets that look similar and levels that are pretty decent, not brilliant, but pretty decent, that people can use instead of the commercial game. So if we go into here and start this up, we should be able to see that there's a Heretic and we can change over to using Blasphemer instead. Blasphemer is the other game, and hopefully I've left some this is the debug version, that's why. Right, here we are. It looks different. I won't say that it looks great because it does look a little bit tacky at times. But it's the same sort of game, just with different weapons. Right, that's not where you go. Where do you go? Where do I need to go? There's some stairs around here somewhere. There they are. Oh, hello. That's a replacement for the wyverns, or whatever dragony things they were. Struggling a little. Oh, go on, shoot him. Get him. And we go up here some more. It's very dark. I can't easily change the gamma levels on this, unfortunately, because I'm on a Mac and F11 does something quite different. I'm guessing those are the equivalent of the mummies, the golems. I can't seem to hit either of them. Go on, go away. But they have got some interesting wider designs like this. And the map is much, much larger for this first level. I'm dying. I'm dead. So it's all a bit different, but all very similar in some respects. Quite a fun little game. So there we go. Any questions? So Nitrax has asked, was there any old code of mine that I saw in 2024 that made me question my sanity? Oh gosh, yes. The entire video code was code that Eddie had originally written, and then I'd taken over and I'd extended and molded in other ways, and some of it was just not bad, but it isn't the way I would do things these days. I would be very, very bit clearer about how I was going to do things these days. Yeah, so there's that. There's also the network drivers that I have looked at, but they're all Gerph patch code, which is my own assembler that I wrote, bolted onto the BBC assembler, BBC Basic assembler, and I'm kind of regretting that now. If I do network drivers, I'm going to have to redo them and do them a bit better than that. Yeah, so there's some bits like that. There's also some changes between the versions. So I've done things much better in Hexen because I knew more what I was doing. And so when I went back to Heretic, I went, why have I done it? Oh, this is an early evolution of it. That's why. So that was some of those examples that was a bit poor. So Mark Stevens has asked, how good is current hardware and RISC OS for games development? Well, I assume it's pretty good. I mean, I've only used it actually for testing. I haven't actually done any development on RISC OS hardware. All my development is done on Mac OS. I write all my code in Sublime Text. I build things in Mac OS in Terminal, and I test things in either RISC OS Pyromaniac or RPCMU. And then I share things over LANMAN to the ROCC box, ROCC box, and I use that as my sort of test system. Would I say it was a good system for development? I don't know. I don't have modern compilers. I've got older compilers here and things. So can't really answer that one. Sorry, Mark. I mean, I will definitely say that from just the examples of playing the games, it is fast. Is it faster than building on macOS? I don't know. I can honestly say that having used Zap again on RPCMU, it fills me with fond memories. But they're memories I'm also happy to have left behind because, yeah, I don't know if anybody can. Let me see if I can do a little bit of a demonstration on this. This might not work. Can I pull this to the front? I probably can't. No, I can't. I can't pull the window I want to the front. I'll have a see if I can do that. But I might be able to demonstrate more how much more flexible it is on here than it would be on RISC OS. Yeah, okay, I don't know how to do this. Just give me a moment. Right. Share a new screen. Put it up here. Right. So, this may not be very exciting, but this is my editor window that I normally use. Hopefully it's vaguely visible. These are the files that are open in it. These are the files that are open in it. These are the files that are open in it. We're still on the files that are open in it. Still on the files that are open in it. Every one of these files is currently open and visible immediately. And we're still going. Oh my gosh, I need to close some of these. We're still going. Oh, come on. There we go. Right, all of those files, that massive scroll area, is files that are currently open and that I can shut the machine down, shut the editor down, bring them all back. I'll be in exactly the same place with my undo buffer, exactly where it was and everything. Trying to do that on RISC OS.
Oh, we're still seeing the paused game.
Damn it. Let's try that again. Did it not share? I didn't press the share button, did I? That was the stupid thing. Can you see an editor now?
Yes.
Right, let's try again. So, go to the top. Right,
Yeah.
all the way, all of these files. All of these files are open. Open, 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 open. And there we go. That's the end where I actually start looking at other things. So, I don't know how many files that is. 400 or 500 files open at once.
Yeah.
I can flip between them. I can search all of them. I can immediately jump between them. I've got two sets of areas here that I can jump between. I mean, I'm not going to evangelize different editors, but it's a much better environment for me. I'm used to it. It works well for me. That's the sort of environment that I work between. And if I want to open a different file, if I want to go to the code that manages, say, I don't know, Hourglass. So I just search for hourglass.py, and I'm now in the Hourglass code. I can jump between them very quickly, see where I'm going. It's a lot easier. So that's how much of a difference it is between the two types of environments, RISC OS and, in this case, Mac OS. Could be Windows as well, just as easily. Okay, did I have any other questions? So, right, there were questions. What's the largest resolution that the game has actually been tested on? I think Andrew has tested it on higher resolutions than I have. I tested it on, oh no, I don't know. So I ran it in Pyromaniac in 6000 by 4000. Obviously it was stupidly slow in that because it's Pyromaniac, it's always slow. But it worked. I have tested it in RPCMU in a 1280 by 1024 visible mode, running 6000 by 2000, using the sprite scaling to scale it down. So knowing that it works, but whatever. So Andrew says he thinks he tested at 8K, but played it at 4K, 3440 by 1440. So I think we're good for going up to the higher resolutions in the future. If we need higher resolutions than 8K, then, well, people have more money than sense if they've got a screen that's that big, because I believe they're incredibly expensive at the moment. But if they want a build that's bigger, I can do you one. The main reason I don't build it any bigger is because it adds more static memory to the build, and then you have to have a bigger WIMP slot that you just won't be using normally. And whilst memory is cheap, I don't see the point in being wasteful, particularly for something that people aren't going to do it. So would I have been able to do the port without Pyromaniac? Yes, I would, but it would have been harder. The main reason is I can reproduce everything absolutely. I can record every single instruction that was executed and print out or get it to report on them, or put a watch point on an address that I know is failing and have it say, okay, before I got to here, I executed just this block of code. Those sorts of things, yes, it makes it run slow, but it sped things up hugely. The sound system code, so the sound is a lot harder because it's a weird sound system. What do we do? We actually replace sound channels. That's why it's a bit weird. And so it's not like any of the other sound systems that I've ever really seen. But yeah, it does seem to work anyway. There was another question. Has Pyromaniac been improved as a result of this work? Yes. So we found probably 7 or 8 minor bugs and 2 or 3 major ones. In particular, the video enumeration, whilst correct, had some odd corner cases that only showed up whilst we were doing this, whilst I was setting that up. And there was something to do with OS dynamic area. OS change dynamic area. When you resize a dynamic area beyond the size that it's allowed to be, returns a different error message, error number. And so I wasn't returning the same one. And it's a certain particular case. I think it actually was introduced in RISC OS 3.8. So it might be the clamping that's actually doing it. I'm not quite sure. But there was definitely something that I had to tweak there. What else? Yeah, so not specifically in Pyromaniac, but Pyromaniac does a stack backtrace when something goes wrong, so you can see what's gone, what functions it passed through. Doom and all the games that are related to it has a stack backtrace code as well that goes and traces back through the code. So whilst I was working on Hexen, I was comparing Pyromaniac's code with Doom's code, or Hexen's code in this case, and checking that they were the same, there were a couple of discrepancies. Whether it's improved it, I don't know, but they're now the same and they now report the same results. So that is better anyway. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, just a quick one. What's the minimum spec that it runs on now? Presumably some version of Pi, is it?
Andrew, do you know this one? I don't.
Right. Because you're doing it on an emulator, presumably.
I could make a joke about, aren't you still compiling the A5000 version?
I am compiling the A5000 version, both for Hexen and for Heretic. I believe it should. Actually, I should try it out on the emulator, shouldn't I? That's a good. Duh.
I haven't tried it on Virtual A5000 because I don't keep a copy of that around generally because it's RISC OS 3.1. But I can say it works quite happily on RISC OS 4, so that's RISC PC hardware, virtual RISC PC.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, you should be able to play it on anything that is sort of, I would say, it might work on 3.7, but it probably works on anything RISC OS 4 and higher.
Yeah, I just wonder whether it's still a RISC PC SA, which is like the bottom, or whether it had gone up to
I think
versions of Pi.
it will work without a strong arm as well.
Oh, really? Oh.
But
It should. We do have special code in there to handle strong arm detection and stuff and turning off some options. But it hasn't. I haven't tested it since then. And obviously doing it in RPCMU doesn't actually test it strong arm, non-strong arm. So I would think it would work. If anybody does want to try it out on an A5000 or the like, then I will happily send. Actually, do we supply the binaries for the A5000 version in Heretic?
I don't know.
I don't know what we do.
It goes out, but I don't know whether you
I mean, that's basically down to. I would like to see if it does work. If it doesn't work, then I kind of don't care. But also, it would niggle me, so I would have to fix it.
Yeah, I think that's possibly going a bit too far for backwards compatibility, really, isn't it? For the level of game and the graphics, realistically.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
The 20x256 fixed resolution versions are included, so those would work certainly on a sort of ARM 610, ARM 710.
Right.
Yeah, and the speed of the game, aside from when it's using sprites, should be pretty much exactly as it was before. I haven't actually spent the time optimizing anything. I may have tweaked a couple of bits. Actually, there are a couple of bits that were tweaked to make them slightly faster because on Pyro it was taking significant lengths of time just to start up. So startup is very marginally faster, but other than that, you're not going to see much else, I'm afraid. And it doesn't actually take any advantage of modern CPU instruction ordering. So there is potentially some work that could benefit there, but hasn't been done yet.
Good stuff.
Anybody want to see Doom?
Yay!
It'd be a lot easier if I could find where the heck my pointer is. I've lost it in the many screens. All right, let's drop out of that. And now everything's moved. Continue running. Let's see what we can do. There we go. Share that screen. I'm still in. Actually, I'm going to just reboot the system because these are debug versions and they sometimes leave stuff behind. It's going to be a bit safer. I do test between them all really regularly, so it shouldn't really matter. Right, so this is Doom Plus. You'll see here I've actually saved out different resolutions as part of the game here. This is a debug version, apparently. So you can save out different setups like this and just have a particular version saved out. I haven't got any plugins on this version, so no networking, no WAD management and things, no WAD mapping and things. Let's drop us to 64480 again, full screen, 24-bit. Oh, one of the new features is anaglyph mode. Let's do 24-bit first, then I'll show you anaglyph, because we all love having our eyes messed with. I haven't yet done the music for Doom, but it's Doom. And we're getting... Oh, I've got the water effect turned on. If the floor looks wibbly, it's because I've got that water effect turned on and I forgot about it. Yeah. It's running 11 frames a second even whilst we've got the video here, so that's not too bad. Yes. I'm not sure if it was everybody's university days, but that was where I ended up playing it a lot. So, there we go. That's Doom. 13 frames a second there. That's not great, but you would get better on a system that isn't videoing. So, no, I just have to do this one because we love it. There we go. I mean, what's not to love? Just having silly menus. Quick game, yes. Right. And then we shall demonstrate anaglyph. Anaglyph is the 3D glasses. Here we are. So, you'll notice that there's no weapon displayed. You can actually turn the weapon on. You can force the weapon to be on. But in my experience, having the weapon at the bottom destroys the effect that you get with the glasses. If I can actually get into the other room, I can shoot these guys. You might be able to see the effect better on the fireballs. Come on, throw a fireball at me. There we go. You can see that different blue and green, blue and cyans coming up. There is a Oh, is there a video? I don't think I've actually put a video up of it. I will put up a video on my site of the 3D anaglyph working. So you'll be able to try it out and see. I think it works. I believe I've got it right. I did a whole bunch of working out the maths of how far apart your eyes are and how far we want to be seeing into the room and what your focal distance is going to be. And I think I got that all right. Is anaglyph unique to the RISC OS version? It might be, actually. I don't know. Yeah, it might actually be unique to it. It would be quite fun, that. Yeah, so yeah, that would be quite cute to have it released with 3D glasses. Also, I'll see. I mean, it's working. It seems to be doing the right things. There's probably a number of things that we'd like to do. The music is one, and there was a couple of other things that I've got listed, and I can't remember what they are. But yeah, those are things that we would like to do to get it released. It's become a little bit of a drag now. As you can imagine, I started on this in January, and I've been working on it spare time, and it's taken up most of my spare time. So it's now become a bit of a, I just want to get it finished. Oh, yes, I can also show you the leaked version. Is this going to work? So this is what we got in the version that I distributed from Eddie's version. You could set this up as site client server or standalone, and it had a bunch of extra options on it as well. And you could look at a collection of what PWODs to add in as well. And then you could click play. There's a bunch of options on there as well. Click play and it would start the game. And you'd have the game running. Ah, yes. The code doesn't work in fully programmable 256 color modes. Doesn't render properly. Apparently that wasn't something that I'd dealt with back when I was doing that in the day. But it does work. Color is a bit ropey, but it's okay. You can make it go continuously. Continuous means even if it doesn't have focus, and then you can say, put it on the icon bar, and then you can close the window. If you close the window, you've got to do use mouse. Like that. Then close the window. Oh, I'm sure I had it working. Oh, I don't know. Right, I'll move it off the screen. There we go. Now we can play entirely on the icon bar, which is as stupid as it sounds. Nope, can't see anything. Right, well, there you go anyway. I can't pick it up. There we are. Yeah, I also don't remember how to play, so that's okay. Anyway, that's the leaked Doom. And when I quit it, it goes and tries to launch the game again, because broken. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. I can't hear anything.
Hello?
How much do each of the games cost?
That's
Shall I do
Andrew.
that? Individually they're £17.50. If you buy either of them on Pling Store, they come with a code to give you a £2.50 off on the other one. So together that means they come to the same price that they did back in 1999. So that's always in RISC OS, no inflation in 20-something years. So yeah, you can either buy them as a pair or you can buy one, just the one that takes your fancy, and then add the other one later if you so desire.
Any other questions or thoughts?
Probably ought to add that Hexen includes the Death Kings expansion. So that's essentially Hexen is sort of, I think, 5 hub worlds.
Yeah, that's right.
Each of sort of 7 or 8 sub levels, as it were. And then Death Kings is another 3 hub worlds with associated things, but they're all a bit harder and a bit longer. But otherwise, it's largely the same assets as the base game, so it's basically just more and harder. With Heretic, you've got the expanded 5-episode edition, which is sort of 5 episodes each of, I think, 9 levels. So that's quite a lot of game. And then we also include the open source Blasphemer pack as well, which is another sort of, I think, 35 levels.
Yeah.
And we re-recorded all the music for Blasphemer, so you get MP3s for Blasphemer as well as the various soundtracks for the main games as well.
I mean, CD music is still supported and MIDI music is supported, but you have to source your own hardware. And that's not easy. Yeah. Oh, and we have tested it with some of the patch wads as well to see whether it works. It does, but a lot of the PWADs have been updated in various ways so that they work better with the newer engines, and they don't necessarily work with bog standard Heretic or Hexen. So you just have to check the documentation to see what it actually says on it. What compiler do I use? I'm using the Norcroft compiler, one that is approximately 534-ish. So contemporary to 2000s. It's quite old. Doesn't have any of the C99 features or anything. But I've got a special version that I've got myself that is for macOS and one for Linux, so I can cross-compile more easily. I have a slight advantage there over many other people.
Pretty cool that compiler from that vintage can still produce perfectly working code on modern systems that just works.
Yeah, I haven't yet had any problems with it. I have there's two additional switches that are needed on some of the code. I forget what, but I also said I would try doing a little demo of it building, so I could do that as well. Let me find a window that's got Hexen in. There we go. Right, let's pull that over there. Share the screen again. Terminal Hexen. Right, can you see a terminal? And is the text big enough? Should I make it bigger? Nobody's complaining. I'm going to leave it. No terminal, no screen. Just appeared now. Okay, fine. We're all good. Right. So make clean. Let's just clear everything out. Time make build. Right. This will build all 5 variants. Go. So just let it do its stuff. It does take a minute or so. But it builds every single one of those. It's also building, so it's building the game, the front end, the support module, and then copying those all into a release directory ready to go for me to test it. And that I can then, it's shared into my RPCMU, so I can run that directly. And I can't tell how far we are through. I've got no idea at the minute. We'll see. It's very exciting.
It always takes longer when you've got to do the demo.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes, I would use that argument. It's running videos as well, so like the game, it's running slower. Yeah, well, there's a lot of warnings out of this because it hasn't been cleaned up properly. That is not a good sign. It's not very professional, but that's the way it is at the minute. Oh, come on. You're letting me down. Okay, so the question's just come up. How oldish is your Mac? 11 years? Yeah, 11 years. It's a 2013 Mac. Like 10 years because it's a late 2013 Mac. Macs generally do pretty well. Okay, executed in 91 seconds. So building those 5 versions took 91 seconds. So presumably one version would be about 5 back. So what we got in here, we got FA and ZA1. I can't remember what that is. I believe that's feature flow anomaly, and that is avoiding underlined addresses, I think. Let's see if we can find out. Right. So that didn't share. Let's see if we can try and do that one again. Right, that's sharing. Okay, CC doc Gerph. Well, that wasn't the page I was looking for, but that'll do. Minus FA. Check for data flow anomalies. And minus ZA1. Ooh, that one's not documented. Yeah, I don't know what that one is then.
Not documented.
Yeah. Is it in info? I don't know what my website looks like anymore. Undocumented NORCOS features. There we go. Minus ZA1. Ah, there we go, ZA. Whether loads can be unaligned or not. So I turn off the unaligned loads because I believe that's not supported on most modern hardware. Yeah. There we go. Anyone else got any questions, thoughts?
I think at this stage I'll stop the recording, but then people can chit chat as long as they like, free of charge. How about that?